Welcome to Blaze News, the mandate day 107. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, the Senate Judiciary Committee will not notice Ed Martin's confirmation this week, which is going to throw his nomination into doubt. Senator Thom Tillis told the White House that he formally opposes Martin's nomination.
If Mr. Martin were being put forth as a U.S. attorney for any district except the district where January 6 happened, the protest happened, I'd probably support him, but not in this district.
Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testified about the Trump administration's audits of the federal government.
There was no accountability. So that is why the 450 organizations that sit above Treasury, where Treasury acts as the paymaster, are unable to pass an audit. So we have the crackdown on that. Every payment now requires a task number.
And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth spoke on the reason for the increased military recruitment since Donald Trump took office.
We are leaving wokeness and weakness behind. No more pronouns, no more climate change obsession, no more emergency vaccine mandates, no more dudes in dresses. We're done with that.
We are done with that. Now, the FBI is again in the hot seat for butchering the investigation into the 2017 shooting of 6 people, including House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. A new report has come out and found that in 2021, the FBI concluded that the motive of the shooting was domestic violent extremism without new evidence and downplayed the shooter's anti-GOP motives. Yesterday, the House Rules Committee voted to send the Gulf of America Act to the full House floor, and this would codify Trump's executive order renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, as it should be. And the AP, if you didn't know, they'll tell you because they actually can't get in to the White House in the Oval Office. Let's go ahead and bring in Blaze News Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
True.
He would never do this, right? We would always go with the Gulf of America here.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we already do. We have a great shirt. We're already selling the T-shirt. We have a great party shirt for summer, Gulf of America, that's selling like crazy because we believe in it. Look, this is the kind of thing that I love Trump for because he picks these examples that are symbolic, right? I mean, this is real. It's a real change, but it's symbolic, and it kind of shows everyone that you can just do things, right? He makes everyone just a little bit uncomfortable. Like Gulf of America, we could never do that. Yes, we can. Mount McKinley, we can't do that. Yes, we can. And it shows you the power of naming. It takes the power of naming away from the left. And it's, you might think it's a small thing or a dumb thing. It's not. It's very serious. It's saying, no, we have the power to name things in the right way.
I would love if we had so many headlines here on this show just saying the FBI is on the hot seat again for insert whatever needs to come next. This is a sign, hopefully, of more accountability to come.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, Jill. More accountability to come is what we need, but it certainly is good to see them called out now. I mean, you're talking about agencies that I would conservatively guess have more than half of the employees at this point who are not on Team America side. They're not on MAGA Maha. These are people who, from the Obama era up until now, see themselves as fighting against the majority movement in this country. So there's a lot of work to do, but again, calling out the truth is important. It spreads the truth. And the fact that the right, just think about how dumb this is. The right never used this politically. They never said, oh, the left is violent, because they actually are. And they have been since the 60s and 70s. And they've committed thousands of acts of terrorism in the 70s alone. And no one ever called out this vicious act of violence because they weren't allowed to. If you're on the right, you just have to put it up. Oh, it's just a crazy person. And if you're on the left, you put everyone who goes to a protest run amok in prison.
Well, let's look at the courts because we talk about them all the time on this show, usually for terrible reasons. But we know that Donald Trump came out with an executive order banning transgenders from serving in the military. And then we see a lower court come through and say, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, today we actually get the Supreme Court that has lifted that pause and saying, actually siding with Donald Trump. So I'm sorry, did the conservatives get a victory in the court today? Is that what happened?
Well, look, even as bad as the court is, and as bad as some of the quote unquote conservatives are, There are certain things that are just going to be able to really hard. There's certain things that are going to be hard to do with a straight face. And one of them is to say that the commander in chief of the entire United States military, the unitary figure who runs the government, the executive, cannot say who is qualified and who is not to be in the armed services. I mean, there's some very basic principles at stake here. And yeah, common sense still wins. I like Trump's phrase, common sense. And I think we'll see more wins as well. And this was good.
Our guy Elon Musk, I think his time is going to be coming to an end as his special service for Donald Trump and the federal government. We hear, though, today from Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, that they might be auditing the federal government. I'm still waiting to go into Fort Knox to see where the gold is. But I would also happily add an audit of the federal government on top of that.
I mean, yes, I audit all of it. I mean, right? The Pentagon hasn't passed an audit ever, it feels like, in recent memory anyway.
I think they failed 7 straight.
Yes, 7 straight in a row. Failures. So here's the thing. We can't stop doing the DOGE thing. And DOGE is now a government agency, right? It's an agency that already existed. It was a very smart move to change that agency into DOGE, Digital Services. My only worry here is I don't want Elon to go before he really has something set in place that he can come back to and check in on that is, almost set in stone. So I hope that's what's going on here. My understanding is that will go on. But we can't have enough tries and at-bats here when it comes to doging the federal government or auditing the federal government. It's going to take a lot to get this right. It's not an easy thing to do. There's a reason it hasn't been done. So, I mean, kind of like all the above. Let's do all these things.
Well, 2 nuclear powers are fighting it out right now. India has confirmed their attacks on Pakistan. And I'll say, it's not like we're both going to be India and Pakistan experts, but I will say that it is very comforting, though, that we at least have Donald Trump in the White House and not the alternative if a situation like this were to arise like it has today.
Yeah, in situations like this, you can be grateful for strong leadership because you know that both nations, there's a lot at stake here. This is a very serious situation, and these nations are at loggerheads, right, to say the least. And the fact that this conflict is starting to break open is not a good thing. But what you know when you have strong leadership is that there is a big, beautiful wall around America, and you know that both these countries are going to want to stay out of our way, and they're not going to want to antagonize us, and that's a good thing.
Yes, we will have more on that as that story develops, but don't go anywhere. We're actually going to have Judicial Watch President Thom Fitton break down the motivations for tanking Ed Martin's U.S. attorney bid right after this. We know that tariffs, they're a problem. They're driving up grocery store prices again. And we actually know that GoodRanchers.com, they're not going to have that problem because their meat is 100% American. So you're protected from all of those price hikes. And their quality, it's unbeatable. So right now, when you subscribe, you can get free meat for life. You can have your choice of ground beef, wild-caught salmon, seed oil-free chicken nuggets, or bacon in every box. And that's over $300 of free meat for every year that you stay subscribed. So Good Ranchers, it's smart too, because they actually have all their cuts are pre-trimmed and vacuum sealed, and they're freezer ready for up to a year. So you don't have to go through and waste any food. You don't have to guess. We know that most families actually throw away about $500 of meat a year. And this is going to fix all of that for you. So you don't have to wait right now. You can go lock in your price, lock in that free meat, and take $40 off with my code Jill at checkout. So visit GoodRanchers.com today. Don't leave your food up to chance. Lock in a secure supply of American meat at a steady price today at GoodRanchers.com. Claim $40 off and free meat for life with code Jill. It's GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered. Well, the big news on Capitol Hill today, Senator Thom Tillis said that he will not support Trump's U.S. attorney pick for D.C., Ed Martin, and it's going to possibly derail his nomination. So for more, we're joined by Tom Fitton. He's the president of Judicial Watch. So Tom, thanks so much for joining us. So why do you think, what's going on here with Senator Thom Tillis? We know he's a frequent person on the opposition of things that the Republicans would like to see done. So why does he oppose Martin in this time around?
Well, he's saying because of January 6th, Ed Martin has been trying to defend the targets of the Biden regime's January 6th prosecutions that were so abusive and had to be undone by the just pardons of President Trump. And he's very seemingly emotional about it. And I don't understand the logic, but, senators do what they're going to do. I'm disturbed because I've learned and I understand that in discussions about Ed Martin's decision, the Ed Martin nomination, Senator Tillis was mocking the death of Ashley Babbitt, whose family we represent in a wrongful death lawsuit that just settled in principle. So that's outrageous to me.
I mean, isn't everything about this, Tom, symbolic of what's still wrong with the Republican Party? I mean, it strikes me like there's North Carolina, South Carolina, you have these places where Texas, Florida, you have these places that people say, oh, it's so red, red state America. And then you have these leaders who go to D.C. and this is what they do. And he's just, it's symbolic, but it's more than a symbol. He's just outright saying, no, I don't care. I think, I'm going to make fun of Ashley Babbitt. Screw the J6ers. I'm not going to do it.
Well, if voters don't like it, they should communicate with Thom Tillis. And if they're concerned that and the Senate can get past this if they want to get Martin confirmed as U.S. attorney as President Trump wants. So it's not over till the fat lady sings, more or less, or till his nomination is pulled. But right now he's stuck in committee, and it's going to take political heavy lifting to get him out of committee in the ordinary circumstance. So, if you don't like what individual senators do, and this is a problem, frankly, for both parties, Democrats and Republican voters expect their party leaders in once they're elected will do what they promise to do and, follow what voters typically want in their party. And that's often not the case. And so voters need to make their voices heard.
Yeah, to Matt's point, what does this say about the unity that you're seeing there from the GOP right now in Washington, D.C.? Because I look at this and we've heard a lot of the talk and we hear a lot of the rhetoric, and Donald Trump is trying to, get out here and play ball with them. But Trump had to go through and even put his message out last night about Ed Martin. And yet today, it doesn't feel like everybody is still on board, right? We got that news, obviously, from Thom Tillis. But right now, just that unity that you're seeing from the GOP or lack thereof.
Well, let me take a step back. Ed Martin is feared by the left. The minority leader, Chuck Schumer, my understanding was going around going after him personally with Republican senators. Schumer's mad at Martin because Martin asked him some tough questions and initiated an investigation that he eventually stopped into whether he broke the law in threatening Supreme Court justices. Adam Schiff has had it in for Ed Martin. And so to me, that's all you need to know if you're a conservative or a Republican on the Hill as to what this is about. This isn't about January 6th. This isn't about crime in D.C. This is about left-wing Democrats, the abusers of Trump, who engage in lawfare, being nervous about having someone in office who might hold them accountable. And I'm hoping Thom Tillis sees that over the next few days and gets over what seems to be his PTSD from January 6th and get a law and order guy into this U.S. attorney's seat, the pick that President Trump wants.
What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen with this?
I'm not sure. It doesn't look good for Ed Martin, absent intervention, a unified intervention from Republican leadership, and they just pull all together to bypass the committee and get him to the floor. And the president may have no choice but to pull him if he doesn't have the votes, because we got to have someone there.
Well, you're talking about January 6th. Let's talk about Judicial Watch. We love a good FOIA around here, right? There's nothing more that gets us riled up. But you have a lawsuit right now going up against the IRS. You're digging for the records on whether or not they targeted January 6th protesters with the ties to Trump's pardon promises. So what are you looking for here in this case?
Well, we suspect, given what Democrats were asking for, that the IRS caved into Democratic pressure and targeted January 6ers, targeted groups that were supporting January 6ers against the abuses that I was talking about earlier, the targeting of them by the Biden regime. And it happened before with the Tea Party. I suspect it happened again with the January 6ers. We asked for the records. We got the proverbial hand to the face. So we sued in court for them. And I'm hoping who's ever running the IRS for President Trump uses this lawsuit as an opportunity to figure out what the IRS was up to, because all the agencies were weaponized by the Biden regime, and the details as to who did what need to be disclosed if we're going to get even a modicum of accountability.
Yeah, amen to that, and the work you do. Is there any indication of Trump officials understanding these issues going into the IRS? Do we have any idea whether there are people in the administration who are concerned about these issues?
I don't. I was talking to Steve Bannon yesterday on his show, and he said he'd never announced it before. He had been targeted by the IRS. Mm. Who knows what's out there? Yeah. It was like the Tea Party. Once it became, and maybe this lawsuit will kind of break open the dam, burst open the dam, and people will say, hey, wait, I'm glad Judicial Watch is asking for this, because I wonder why I was targeted. Well, how did I get an audit after never hearing from the IRS ever before in my life? And I think we're going to start getting information that either from Trump officials or supporters of Trump or people who participated in January 6th, that they feel like they were improperly targeted by the IRS.
Well, I want to go over this because we got actually some big news out of the Supreme Court today, because they just gave the go-ahead for Trump's ban, lifting the ban on the transgender people serving in the military and actually flipping a lower court's ruling. And Tom, it almost feels strange to win a court battle these days. We've had all these headlines that have gone against us. We see lower court judges all the time just go out there and try and say, you know what, we're going to do it our way. But actually, how did this one happen? How did the conservatives actually come out on top for this one?
Well, this is a case of the coup being paused. The Supreme Court operated the way it was supposed to, I think, in recognizing that a lower court essentially tried to hijack the powers of the commander-in-chief in terms of setting policy and related to personnel in the military. This isn't the first time there's been a restriction on transgender service in the military. It happened under Trump. And so for judges immediately to grant relief and basically tell President Trump he can't do anything when it comes to personnel in this area in the military, I think was a bridge too far for even Supreme Court justices who sometimes let the lower courts get away with doing too much. Like, I'm thinking of the Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett and maybe Justice Gorsuch now and again.
Tom, we got through the first 100 days. Everyone was talking about the first 100 days, and it really struck me and many others here. Each stage that you get through, you're not tired of winning, but then you see, how much more the mountain you have to climb. And the first 100 days were amazing. There's a lot of fireworks, EOs, et cetera. And now it strikes me like, talking to people there and just, being aware of the situation. Now is where the real work really starts to come in. Things start to come into crunch time. What is your take on the administration overall for the, where we're moving into? Where do you think the biggest obstacles are, and what do you think is the biggest, successes, stuff you think is going to be good?
Well, the president secured the border.
Yep.
Yep. Our country was going to break unless that was done. And as far as I'm concerned, he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize for it. He's reversing the invasion as best as he's able, but he needs more capacity and more money from Congress to do it. So the big hurdle next is the Congress getting this legislation passed, the so-called reconciliation fight settled, so we know that taxes aren't going to go up by $4 trillion next year, and there's going to be funding for increased enforcement with interior removals, the mass deportation. So that's going to be an important issue. And as I was saying earlier with Ed Martin and generally, there's got to be some accountability in a more aggressive way for the deep state abuses, the Biden regime abuses of Trump, and frankly, accountability for the criminality of the Biden regime in terms of Biden family corruption and the other corruption issues that were ignored by the previous Justice Department. And I frankly think weak sisters in the Trump Justice Department in the first term. So President Trump should light a fire under the Justice Department or, as I've been highlighting, exercise his power as president to appoint special prosecutors to investigate the various issues the Justice Department seems to be taking a go-slow approach on.
Well, Thom, great information. Keep the FOIAs coming. We love that here. And congratulations. Thanks for powering through that microphone. You did it very, very well today.
Welcome.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Chris Bedford will expose how Washington State is targeting Catholicism coming up. Well, we know we're winning. Peterson was just talking about how we love all of the winning. The momentum is shifting. But we know, as he was saying, we still have a long ways to go. And that's why Blaze TV exists, because we need to keep pushing forward. We can't stop now. We have all the great reporting, all the stories that the corporate media won't touch. And when you subscribe, you're not just watching Blaze TV, you're actually standing with a movement. And right now, it's just $8 a month when you use the code BNT at checkout. So go to blazetv.com/BNT, use that promo code BNT, and save $20 off an annual plan. Let's keep winning together. Blaze TV, unfiltered, unafraid, on demand. Well, if you look at your calendars, the May 20th deadline for Ed Martin's confirmation is quickly approaching. And with the Senate Judiciary Committee refusing to consider his nomination this week, it's not looking very good. Even with Trump calling the judiciary members, several people still have not announced how they're going to vote. So here to break it all down for us is senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So what's going on with all this infighting there in D.C. right now?
It's kind of a Senate rebellion against the president and his nominees. And the leader of this, I've got my Beltway brief coming out about it in the morning, is Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina, someone who's been a thorn in the side of conservatives and the MAGA agenda from day one, and someone who is making the political, and I think actually the personal calculation, because he's really, by all reports, very personally invested in hating everything to do with defending the people who've been swept up and imprisoned over January 6th, about generally siding with Democrats and more the squishy Republicans and matters like that. He's been disowned by his own state party, which censored him over his votes on immigration, his votes on gay marriage, other socially conservative issues, his votes on guns and the Second Amendment protections. He's run afoul of conservatives time and time again, and this time he's against Martin for being the U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C. Now, to put this in perspective, you don't even have to go back to Eric Holder to remember Barack Obama's extremely politicized attorney general passing out of committee, the Judiciary Committee, on a voice vote, or actually 17-2 was the final committee vote. You can go back to the last U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C., who was under Joe Biden, who oversaw a massive spike in the violent crime in this city, who oversaw a massive explosion of homicides, a massive explosion of carjackings, who passed out of committee in a voice vote, and then later on passed out of the Senate in a voice vote. So Thom Tillis is holding this up, and he's supposedly whipping different Republicans to join him in this fight.
Chris, isn't this a fine example of the problem in Congress? I mean, this strikes me as the kind of thing we have a popular candidate to be confirmed. Many people, like him. He's MAGA, world centric. He's going to do the thing that DC is afraid of, and this is it. I mean, it has all the elements, right? It's U.S. senators who are Republicans, supposedly in the Senate, who don't understand what time it is and are just going to say no in public.
Yeah, one of the big things that has really ticked off a lot of Republican senators is that Ed Martin's gone on a lot of different conservative and alt-right and different even fringy shows in the past. And sometimes on these shows and in his articles, things he's written, he has been critical of Republican senators. How dare he? As one friend I was talking to, a longtime Hill reporter and former congressional staffer, mentioned earlier, hell hath no fury like a senator who feels insulted. And this seems to be the case for him here. And also at the same time, there's a lot of groups that are pushing for a squishier Republican, someone who's kind of the classic, someone who may be law and order and willing to defend police officers in a way that literally the last U.S. attorney for D.C. was unwilling to bring assault against an officer charges, which happened fairly frequently in Washington, against people. He would always downgrade that to an assault. He would not prosecute 2/3 of the cases that were brought by police officers, including more than half of felony arrests that were brought by police officers, would just ignore them. That has been completely switched. But more than that, Ed Martin has actually gone after the super political DC attorneys and those staff who have worked tirelessly to put political dissidents in prison, who are a part of this. He's not just simply saying the policy is different, there's a new sheriff in town. He's saying that those people who are complicit in political persecutions, those people who were part of this machine that refused to prosecute crime, well, the city got less and less safe. And I got news for you. When Washington, D.C. is unsafe at baseball games where the upper middle class bring their families, it's extremely unsafe in the poorer areas of the city, those places that supposedly the Democrats get all their constituents from. The black areas of DC where kids were getting shot by stray gang fights. It was absolutely awful. Some of the pictures and some of the stories and some of the photographs of these little children who are being killed coming out and these mothers crying. And so when DC gets lawless in the nice areas, it's even worse in the poorer areas. And the last attorney general allowed this sort of thing. The last district attorney pushed this sort of thing. So Ed Martin's going after the people who are responsible for this and is actually potentially going to bring them to trial, or not to bring them to trial, but is demoting them and is firing them.
Well, let's go from Washington, D.C. to Washington State, because the state of Washington has looked at the FBI and said, oh, you can't be the only ones that are trying to mess with the Catholics. We must get involved with that, too, because the state of Washington has just passed a law requiring that Catholic priests actually go through and break the seal of confession if they're informed of abuse. Now, bishops, to their credit, are saying there's absolutely no way that they're going to comply with this. But Chris, I know that the three of us here, we're all Catholics, but can you explain this for some of our non-Catholic viewers so they can understand what's going on here?
Absolutely. The sacrament of confession is one of the 7 sacraments, one of the crucial sacraments of the Catholic Church. It's the way that people bring their sins before God and ask for forgiveness and penitence. It's as important as marriage. It's as important as last rites. It's as important to salvation as baptism. It's something that is essential in the spiritual life of Catholics, and it's been for 2,000 years, or one of the most protected parts of the Catholic Church. As one priest who's a frequent confessor told me, it's really essential not to have a very good memory, because you hear things, you hear a lot of things, and people have to unburden themselves with some darkness, and they only can do that and have that access to the sacrament if they know that that the seal of confession is legit. It's not another therapist's couch where if you talk about these sorts of things, they have duties to law enforcement. It is removed from this world, and it's also a complete and total false herring, a red herring for liberal politicians to be chasing. The problem with the priest abuse scandal and the child abuse scandals of the past was not that they were whispered in confession and not confronted, is that they were known to the higher ups of the church and covered over and papered over. I'm from Boston. I grew up in Boston. We had family friends who killed themselves after the awfulness that they were subjected to by some satanic priests and some people who took advantage of that, people who abused the sacraments, people who were wicked in their heart, and people who were papered over by the cardinal and cardinal law and taken care of and protected from the authorities. It's not a matter of confession. So this is an actual just attack on the church, on the sacraments. And it's a great thing that the bishops are coming up against it, but it also falls into a freedom of religion fight that is crucial to battle back against. And that's why I'm really excited to see that the Federal Department of Justice is now investigating this law for the obvious civil rights violations that it entails.
Yes, Chris, and we should say, I mean, this has been something that has been recognized for a long time in the United States as part of what you don't touch because of that freedom of religion. It's interesting to me that every so often this issue does come up, and you see it, you've seen it over the last 20, 30 years. I'm curious your thoughts as to where this is coming from, because this has been recognized for a long time, generally speaking, as something you don't touch, right? But I always suspect the increase, there's increasing pressure on the church on this issue, and it has less and less to do with what these people say, in the front, and more about what they're carting in the back, which is just an anti-religious fervor.
I think that's exactly it. And I was thinking about the same thing, Matthew. The fact that these sort of laws were pushed in Australia. They were talked about in Massachusetts at the height of the abuse crisis, which, not to date myself, but I was a child during these, when they came out. Most of these offenses are from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Not even really from the 90s when it started to be known, not from the 2000s or the 2010s. Forget about the 2020s. There is not a massive call for this. What there is, however, is a massive and increasing anti-Catholic animus across the West. We saw it last year, or a few years ago now. We saw the massive spate of church burnings across Canada done by activists who were burning down the things that have been built by the poor and built by the faithful in the name of somehow freeing them, basically with the tacit and sometimes illicit approval of Prime Minister Trudeau at the time, and the apologies of the Pope, which was a sad moment for everyone. We've seen across the United States, and they don't report on this. They'll report on the attacks on plenty of different religions. Corporate media will report on increasing attacks against Asians or against Hindus or against Jews. But the increase on intentional vandalism and attacks and anti-Catholic attacks on churches is up hundreds and hundreds of percent over the last many years. As a priest who deals a lot with the demonic once told me, unfortunately, it's a very hard job for a priest. It's not as cool as the movies make it seem. He said, the devil is no longer hiding in the shadows. The devil is very much out in the open. You have now U.S. senators, and he was talking about that from his personal experience with dealing with them and dealing with them with trying to free different parishioners from the influence of these things. But you see it in the U.S. Senate. You saw the religious test being reintroduced. You saw people being accused of being parts of extremist groups before they could get a nomination to a judgeship because they were members of the Knights of Columbus, which is a life insurance and volunteer group that helps. We do things like literally set up the tables and the chairs for the bingo and run the Oktoberfest and help raise money around Christmas and do food drives. It's not an extremist organization. That's completely insane. And you'd see that said in the halls of power, and you'd see a lot of different people openly saying, as a Catholic, by the way, none of them go to church. At least they don't go on Sunday, every Sunday. Maybe they show up for Christmas and Easter. They're not going to confession. They, by all actual rules, would not be allowed to get married or buried in the Catholic tradition. So, but they claim that they're Catholic, so they're allowed to do this anti-Catholic bigotry and score political points with the anti-religious left. By the way, that's how Governor Shapiro, who is not Catholic, rose to prominence in Pennsylvania, was by not actually solving problems, but by persecuting the church and the faithful for past issues in order to make a name for himself and get more money for a secular state. It's a serious ladder for climbing power in democratic politics, and it's an insidious one.
All right, Bedford, let's end this conversation on a little bit of a lighter note because the NFL draft is coming to Washington, D.C. We're about to get our viewer questions and answers from this. I have to get your take. It's your city. You're our Mr. D.C. guy. What's your rundown here?
Oh, my rundown is I can't wait for you guys to come here and be reporting live. We have an actual sportscaster on the team, which will be phenomenal. I tell you what, I played football for 6 years, but I don't think I've ever watched a single draft. This will have to be the first time that I go down to that beautiful National Mall and check the whole thing out, because DC is a beautiful city, and it's a wonderful place to highlight these events for all the awfulness that actually goes on here, which is what we talk about most nights. It's a beautiful city, and I really do love, sports was not political at all previously. I guess they had the rah-rah patriotism. They got paid by the military for flying jets over. They had some great American flag waving stuff. Barack Obama really politicized sports in a negative way. A lot of people felt that it was okay to talk about it. That's when ESPN went to hell. That's when you could no longer watch a baseball game without some broadcaster pronouncing about how global warming might be affecting the ability to hit home runs, like if it wasn't steroids or something. But Donald Trump being a big part of sports, being a big part of the Indy 500, going to American sports. And I hope it's bringing it back to just a level of, this is part of civic engagement. This is where we gather after the Boston bombing. This is where we gathered after 9/11. This is where something that brings Americans together. And it should be in a truly patriotic and a beautiful way, and not in a political way.
It absolutely should be. And I want to just inform the audience what happened for the last NFL draft, because we were actually back out there in Washington, D.C. And that's when the two of you had guys' night. And yet me, the old broadcaster here, went through, I walked up along the wharf, I grabbed myself some gelato, and I sat back in my hotel room and watched the NFL draft alone. And that is the breakdown that we have here for the way that the mandate is set up.
But to be fair, I mean, the first night of the draft is like, if you're bored, it's kind of fun. But I mean, I'm just curious, like, who my team gets, right? Yeah. Which someone's going to update me. I'll look at it. I'll watch the videos later, which I did that night. And that was it. So there's a low-key way to do this.
Yeah, well, it's time to make the Redskins great again. We'll have your thoughts, though, on D.C. getting the NFL draft right after this.
I'm pleased to reveal that the 2027 NFL draft, that's a big thing, will be held right here in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., on the National Mall.
I mean, I don't care who you are. You can't hate it when the guy is out there who's the president of the United States who's like, that's a big deal, by the way. And it's like, it's the NFL draft. Yes, I love, just the press conferences that we get back, because sometimes you just miss those. But this one, it is a big deal, Peterson.
Oh, yeah. The NFL draft is kind of a bigger and bigger deal. They just make more and more of a party of it, right? Since in the last like 10, 20 years. And to have that back in DC is huge. And as we were saying with Chris, as you were talking about, I mean, the Redskins need to come back next. That's what I want to see happen next. My grandfather was a huge Skins fan, if I can say so myself. And the most ridiculous thing that has ever happened in sports almost to me is having to call the Washington Redskins the Washington football team, and now the Commanders, which everyone knows is lame. So we're just doing this. I mean, Jill is pushing this. I am pushing this in inserting it into the NFL draft going to DC. Let's get that name back.
Listen, we are here for justice on this show, and that's going to lead us right into the question we asked on X today. I said, you know what, with the NFL draft in D.C. in 2027, do you think it's possible to go back to the Redskins before this happens? Because this is all we really need in life. Let's go ahead and start out with production assistant. He says, no chance. More likely, Trump will try to get them to change their name to the Washington Orange Skins. And you know what? I actually haven't heard Donald Trump referred to as Orange Man Bad in quite some time. And I will say he's a little less orange. Trump 2.0, not as orange.
It is true. He's
right?
like less orange. Yeah. More laid back. That's true. Orange Skins. I mean, Okay, kind of funny. I get it. The orange skins. No. I want to see full trad naming going back to the Redskins.
We have to go back to the Redskins. Let's go ahead and move on to Garrett, who replied in. He says, the pageantry of the NFL draft embarrasses me as a man. Our nation needs attentive and engaged husbands and fathers, but these sports bros will spend thousands of hours of their life obsessed over the personnel of a game. Meanwhile, city councils trans their kids. I don't know if Garrett is friends with Todd Erzin, but I think if they aren't already friends, they should be. Todd out there on the Steve Day Show often replying with things that Garrett just said.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, this is a great talking point. A lot of people have been making this point in the last few years. I couldn't agree more. On the other hand, though, there are a lot of times people who say this. I'm not saying this about Garrett. They're not sports fans anyway. And then I find out that they have some other thing that they waste time on, right? It's like, well, yeah, these sports fans, they watch thousands of hours. And that's true. You're not wrong. People should spend more time on their city council and actually get involved in local politics, stand up and take control of their government again. That's something that I do and friends do, and I encourage other people to do. At the same time, though, I just want to make this caveat. The problem is a lot of people who rip on sports really vehemently in this way. Then I ask them a question about what else, what do they do as a hobby? And like, oh, well, I play video games.
Yeah.
Right? So let's just make sure like recreational sports watching is fine. But obviously you need to do it in moderation.
I will tell you, you can be the fan of the Buffalo Bills because you were the one texting everybody this weekend, letting them know, hey, by the way, this is when the city council race is. Everybody go out and vote. So you definitely
Hillary Kennedy
held
and
up.
her family went out. Give him props.
You definitely held up your end of the bargain. Let's go ahead and round out today's replies with Fred. He says the Washington Commanders going back to the Redskins by the 2027 NFL draft is only going to happen if the team decides to tackle controversy like it's 4th and goal with no timeouts, MP.
Do I want to go into this? I'm not sure. Look. Let's be serious about it though for a minute. What would it take? We can joke around in all these responses, but what would it take to move this forward? I don't think it's impossible anymore. I don't think it's impossible as people think. I don't think that logo was as offensive as people think. I think a lot of people, but look, I don't know.
They have a new owner. He's doing things, obviously turning the franchise into the good direction. And as I sit here and I was saying justice, right? We needed justice earlier. Now I'm thinking this word means one thing, but Peterson, if you're a liberal person and you're hearing this conversation and you hear us talk about the Redskins, well, justice would mean something completely different to those people. And I think, you know what? We have to go back to the fact that words have meaning.
Yes, this is a really key point because words are what help you see the world. And so, using the Redskins or as a name, right, that means something. I don't think it was derogative. You could change the logo in that case, but that's another story. The reason the left goes after these things is because they do understand that words have meaning in many cases, or at least unconsciously they understand it, and that's why they want to change. They want to exercise power, not just over words, over the way that you see the world. There's this great book I have with these old words from the British Isles, and they refer to things in nature that people just don't even notice anymore. And once you know the word for it, once you know the word for the hole under the hedgerow in England, which is where the rodent scurries under, then you see that thing, right? You notice with colors in the ancient world, when you talk about certain colors that certain cultures notice more than others because they have the word. We don't think about this enough. We take it for granted. We don't really understand language. We don't really understand grammar. But the reason that these battles are being fought is because language changes the way you perceive the things around you, and it calls attention to certain things as opposed to other things. And so if you know the word for it, you have power over it. You think of the old Viking mythology with runes, right? Or the idea of spells, right? Coming from chanting certain words. Well, there's a whole lot of superstition there, but there's a deep truth to it because the word has meaning and it points to certain things in reality. And if you don't know the word, you don't see the thing. So apply that to just today. I mean, we're talking about the Redskins example, right? And the language that we're wrangling about in politics all the time. Even the phrase trans, right? Every single descriptor when it comes to sexual politics, let's say, is fought over by the left, because that is like taking ground in your mind. It's not just, words on a page. It's like they are conquering your mind, incepting themselves in your mind by presenting things a certain way. And I think the right does understand that now, and that's partly like Trump Gulf of America. He's showing you that we have the power to do the same thing, to take over language and therefore how we see reality.
Matthew, people ask me all the time, what is my favorite word? And I tell them that my favorite word is the word. And if you remember, that is a old quote from one Nancy Pelosi back in the day, which I'm sure that nobody has ever asked her before in the history of her entire life, which is a very long one, what her favorite word is. Even though we're having this discussion about language and meaning and words, I'm still not going to ask you what your favorite word is. And this is just the absurdity that the left will go to, one, to try and pretend that they're religious. But I want to go back to a conversation actually that Glenn Beck had on his radio program a few years ago, and he was just like, the left and the right were so far apart because we don't think that the words that we're saying even mean the same thing. And he went through, just the different meanings behind it, that, it's the empathy, it's the justice, it's all these words that we say on the surface, but you can't break through to even the understanding of what those words were. I just look at that and said, that was a profound conversation that he had several years ago, and it stuck with me all this time.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. It's a famous Christian text, and the word meaning logos, or reason in Greek, because it's what shapes, what you see. So exactly, if we have two different languages, right? We're in the Tower of Babel and we're just speaking past each other, or we're in English, but we're using, one person is using woke words and the other's not, then we're not seeing the same movie. We really aren't. We're looking into reality and we're focused on completely different things, right? And it's like a child, if you're retarded by this, if your brain is slowed down by this, it's as if you look out at the world and what you see is just a bunch of colors and images, but you don't know what the things are, right, that you see. Like a little baby sort of just seeing color and starting to look around. And that's what it's like with these people. So this is it's not just education, right? This is cultural. It's how we build culture.
To Chris Bedford's point, what do we have to do right now? Who do we have to talk to? What are all the pieces that we have to get in place to get the mandate out in Washington, D.C. for the NFL draft? We have a lot of time to plan this. We need to make this happen.
Yeah, I think we need to plan that. I think we need to plan around some games. I mean, this opens up a whole new world of possibilities for travel for the mandate.
It does. You know what? Jaden Daniels, Marcus Mariota, their quarterbacks coach, they're all my favorite people. They're all just assembled there on one team. Maybe we can make it happen. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody, tonight. We'll see you back here again tomorrow.